Hi, Shereen.
Hi. How are you?
Good. Good. A lot of people signed up.
How do you see that?
Oh, I'm seeing the executive director list.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you meant people on board here. I was like,
No, I don't see that. We have 8 of us.
Is it anybody else's screen, or I see the agenda as being like 2/3 of my screen?
That's true.
I see the same.
Yasmin, is there any way?
You would have
difficult part of the meetings.
Yeah, you would have to change. I think if you go to the 3 dots and go to change layout.
But it's everybody's view. Everybody is seeing it.
Right.
As,
everybody would have to change their view.
Uh-huh.
So do you not want me to present the agenda for the public?
No. We love it. But just like the conversation last week, we want to make sure that we could visually see each other's faces, just so that there's enough room on the computer screens that we could see each other.
Well, I think she can move that shared document up and down.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's
Okay.
all it is.
So we're waiting on Watchman and Meal, right?
Correct.
I have taken your request to heart, Erica. Tried to get here a few minutes early.
Well, but actually, technically, we really can't for the public's sake. We cannot start early.
Right.
But it's nice to visit early and just know everybody's here and
say hello.
Exactly. It's our one opportunity with open meeting laws to actually just see each other and say hello.
Yeah.
Although I heard a good suggestion from somebody when we're eventually out and about and moving around the state, that after we have some, public presentations or meetings, that if we want to actually be able to have a meal together, we could schedule it as an open meeting opportunity for the public to come join us. And then it's casual, opportunities to chat, but it's within the public record.
It's good to know. Did we ever receive that last batch of applications? If we did, I did not see it.
Yeah, it was.
I have sent it to your IRC email, but I once I received your email this morning, I sent it to your personal email.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know how to get to that. I know you told us. I'm sorry.
No, actually, when you receive your state issued laptop, that's when you'll get the instructions for your new
Okay.
one.
So since I don't have it yet, that's why I didn't know. Okay.
Correct.
Right. But Commissioner Lerner, are you able to access that list while we're discussing today? Because there were some applicants from that pool that we may want to discuss.
I'm pulling it up right now. I
Okay.
had not seen an email. I was on this morning, but now I just saw it now. So I will look at them as we're hanging out.
Hey, Erica, how do I change my name on my picture? I can't seem to find that. Tile. Can't remember.
How do you change your?
What's to rename your?
I would not ask me any technology question.
Hey, Yasmin, how do I put my name on the picture?
On what picture? I apologize.
Well, on my video picture.
Your name is there. Your name is there. It says Douglas York.
It shows up. It shows up here as that.
Here it says you.
Same here. Mine says you as well.
Yeah.
Hey, John.
We're all just yous.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw. I had not seen that before. All of a sudden, and that was the first time I'd seen that today.
Well, it's funny on Teams and Zoom. Whatever you label yourself, it shows up. So on Google, you have to sign in, but
Yeah, it's different.
I can't wait till when we're meeting in person and we actually can meet each other.
It's true. It is nice.
Okay.
Hey, Derek.
Morning,
Oh,
Derek.
we have both Commissioners Meal and Watchman. I think we have the full group. I want to make sure, do we have our council Pam on the call?
I think Jim.
I am on the call. I'm having a little bit of iPad trouble. So as soon as it lets me back in, I will switch devices.
Okay, but I want to make sure
Right
that
now.
you're, are you active and participating, and are you good with us calling the meeting to order?
Yes.
Okay, welcome everybody, commissioners, staff, public. We are now going to call the meeting to order. 1A, call for quorum. It is 9:02 on Tuesday, March 2nd, 2021. I call this meeting of the Independent Redistricting Commission to order. For the record, Yasmin, the administrative assistant, will be taking roll. When your name is called, please indicate you are present. If you're unable to respond verbally, we ask that you please type your name. Yasmin?
Thank you, Chairwoman Newberg. I'm going to take roll call now. Vice Chair Watchman,
Present.
Commissioner Lerner,
Present.
Commissioner York,
Present.
Commissioner Meal,
Present.
Present.
and then also for the record, we have our legal counsel, Pamela and Kyle on the line. And then we also have our transcriber, Angela Miller.
John Fry.
And Ms. Ferrera
And
will
John
be
Fry,
late.
apologize. And back to you, Chairwoman.
And please note for the minutes that a quorum is present. Agenda item 1B, Yasmin, was the notice and agenda for the commission meeting properly posted 48 hours in advance of today's meeting?
Yes, it was posted well in advance of 48 hours.
Okay, thank you very much. Agenda item 2, approval of minutes from February 16th, 2021 from the general session public meeting. As a reminder, we posted the video recording, which fulfills all statutory requirements. Is there any discussion regarding the public session minutes for February 16th? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes for February 16th.
I motion we approve the minutes for February 16th.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Meal seconds that. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll do a quick vote. Commissioner Watchman,
Aye.
Commissioner Meal,
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner,
Aye.
Commissioner York,
Aye.
and Commissioner Newberg is an aye, and with that, the minutes are approved. There were no executive session minutes. There was no executive session. With that, we'll move on to item number 3, opportunity for public comments. Public comment will now open at 9 for a minimum of 30 minutes and remain open until the adjournment of the meeting. Comments will only be accepted electronically in writing on the link provided in the notice and agenda for this public meeting and will be limited to 3,000 characters. Please note, members of the commission may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. With that, we'll move, we're going to use discretion and move item number 4, which is discussion and update on the data census delay. to after item 6, we are going to take advantage of having John Fry, our special employment expert from the Attorney General's office. He's here joining us, and we can take advantage of his participation to work through the questions and the process of the executive director position. So with that, we're going to move to item number 5, discussion and possible action of interview questions for the executive director hiring. Please note the commission may vote to go into executive session, which will not be open to the public, for the purpose of obtaining legal advice specifically related to potential interview questions for applicants to the executive director position pursuant to ARS 38-431. So with that, you have all received an initial batch of 10 questions that were vetted by John Fry. Commissioner Lerner has also generated a few additional questions that have been vetted. We would like to, please note that these questions are meant as a first opportunity to tap into the criteria, the things that we posted on the job search board, and a way for us to think about the types of questions that will bring us the kind of information we need to make the decision. They're not exhaustive. Everybody on the commission has different skills. So I'd like to ask that if others, after reviewing those questions, would like to propose additional questions, please submit them. I'd like to ask for a 48-hour deadline, let's say maybe noon on Thursday. Out of an abundance of caution, it'd be a good practice to submit the potential questions to John Fry for his review. Again, we're not going to be handcuffed. We'll be able to ask spontaneous questions, follow-up questions. But I think, preparing in advance for the different buckets just behooves us. So any other comments, discussion about the questions that we're going to be asking?
Commissioner Newberg, and I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding at this point, are we including all of the questions that have been so far proposed? Because I know the ones that I put in there were for discussion. They weren't really couched very clearly as specific questions, and to some extent they overlapped some of what you had developed as well. So are we saying that we're just going to go with what we have, or are we going to come back and fine tune before we begin interviewing? I'm sorry if I misunderstood.
No, yeah, Commissioner Lerner, it's actually confusing, because the truth is, with the open meeting laws, we won't have the opportunity to convene and really discuss these questions amongst ourselves. It's not an item that justifies going into executive session. And so we of course have the prerogative to discuss that, but then we would be telegraphing to all applicants exactly what our questions will be and how we will think about them. So one way to think about it is for all of us to have a list of pre-vetted questions that tap into the different buckets, and it will be somewhat organic. We can go around, okay. It remains to be discussed how long the interview will be, but, let's just imagine, it could be 2 rounds of questions. Each person gets to ask 2 questions, a little bit of time for follow-up. We'll use our judgment. Let's piggyback, let's trust each other, and I feel comfortable about it.
No, that sounds great. I think that sounds like a great plan, and I apologize if I misunderstood, but I really like that idea. That kind of allows us to have lots of options in there. That's great. Thank you.
This is Commissioner York. I have one comment, Eric, Commissioner Newberg. In the interview process, we interviewed the executive director, the independent, we kind of divvied up kind of where everybody would land in their questioning process so we could be consistent. And you might, when you incorporate Commissioner Lerner's questions, maybe consider blocks. So this one's about previous experience. This one's about future.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay.
So that we could kind of Commissioner Watchman or myself could kind of take one bucket or the other, and we'd be consistent in our interview process.
Excellent. So what I think I'm hearing is that when we disseminate the final list of questions, maybe separate them into buckets so that it's abundantly clear what, strengths it's tapping into, and it just makes it a little more user friendly, I think, when we're in the motion.
Sounds great.
Okay. Any other further conversation? There's not a motion here, I don't believe. Unless, Pam, do we need a motion to set a deadline of 48 hours to get in additional questions?
Having a deadline or having it determined by motion is not a bad idea. It's the safest route, especially since you don't have an executive director at this juncture that's been delegated specific duties.
Okay, so out of an abundance of caution, let's have a motion that we will entertain additional questions to be vetted by John Fry. We request the questions to be submitted by noon on Thursday, and we will try to turn around the full list of questions, divided up into different segments, hopefully by the end of Friday. Do we have a motion?
Vice Chair so moves.
Do we have a second?
Commissioner this is Commissioner York. I have a question regarding the motion. When we say we're talking about the council members, correct? Not the public. Who's submitting additional questions?
The commissioners.
Okay, that's what
Just the 5 commissioners will submit questions.
Thank you. I second the motion. Commissioner York.
Any further discussion? With that, we will do a vote. Commissioner Watchman?
Aye.
Commissioner Meal?
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner?
Aye.
Commissioner York?
Aye.
Commissioner Newberg is an aye, and with that, the motion passes. With that, we'll move on to item 6, which is discussion and possible action on executive director and other administrative support positions. As we talk about this, I think there are 2 buckets to be thinking about this. One is the process through which we will interview, and maybe we could put that aside to the first question of, narrowing the list down. Now, one possible way, please note again, we have identified, we received 42 applications. I want to commend the public. They were fabulous, incredibly talented, capable people. It was a difficult process for me personally to be really thinking through, what strengths we need and how to tap into the people that could, hit the ground running. But I just want to thank everybody that took the time to apply and be part of the process. One possible way for the 5 of us to do this is to take turns and share the people, again, using numbers. Every applicant has been assigned a number. We would like to protect the confidentiality of all applicants. So as we discuss them, we refer to their number, and as we discuss their strengths, weaknesses, prior employment positions, let's make an effort to not identify who they are, because if you give a lot of specific information, then that confidentiality can be lost. So one possible way is to move around the commissioners and for you to share the list of people that you were interested in interviewing, for us to compile a comprehensive list that the 5 of us are interested in, and then going through each one, talking about the strengths, weaknesses, and then culminating in a vote. But there's other ways to do it. So if there's other ideas, I open it up to discussion.
This is Commissioner Meal. I think I'd be comfortable with that.
Okay. Well, with that, and I want to recognize, I believe one of the 5 commissioners did not have a significant advance notice to really read through all the resumes. Is that correct? Has everyone else had the opportunity to really sift through things in a meaningful way? I have. Okay. So Commissioner Lerner, as we go through, you know, it may be a little bit more pressure on you, but if you could have a screen up with, okay, excellent. And if you need additional time, you know, please let us know, because this is a serious conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will, sorry, I have to unmute. Oh, I am unmuted, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, we hear
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry, my computer's acting up. I did receive all but the last batch, so I had reviewed those, but this last batch, I don't have. So I may be without some knowledge on it, and I'll do my best to keep up with all of that and get the numbers. I do have a separate screen.
Okay.
I don't. Well, this is Commissioner York. I have not reviewed the last 10 that were released to us yesterday. The other concern is that in the numbering sequence on the original document, the applicants were submitted, and then as we got the additional 10, they were reinserted in alphabetical order. So I think it's going to be difficult for us to number. I was curious maybe if we should review and then come back to you with a list of our discussion, our candidate numbers. Because if realistically we got the final list of 42 yesterday, which was a new sequence of listing of applicants because it's in alphabetical order. I don't know. I think it's going to be confusing if we have that discussion right now.
And Commissioner Newberg and Commissioner York, maybe I don't know if this is possible, but could we go into executive session to make sure that we're on the same page with the numbering, with the names, all of those things, not to discuss the applicants, but just to be sure that we all have that in the same manner. So when we're speaking of number 12, we all know who number 12 is. That kind
Well,
of
so before we go to executive session, let me just be clear for all 5 commissioners. Yesterday afternoon, Yasmin sent out a new batch that was the final comprehensive batch.
Right.
It had 42 applicants. Each applicant had a number assigned to it. That is the final assignment of numbers to names, and that is the final batch of applicants. So that is what we need to go through. Commissioner York, the names of the people are the same, so it may just take a little bit of time to visually look at this one list.
No,
Now,
I see that now, Commissioner Berg. I was looking at the previous list, which did not have numbers. And so
correct.
when she resent it, she shuffled the deck a little bit, but so I had looked at the previous applicants and had printed out their resumes and kind of done some review. And so for me, I was trying to figure out what other ones I hadn't done. So you get it.
Okay. I think if too many of us have not had the sufficient time to review the last 10 applicants, that poses a problem that we need to discuss.
Yeah, Madam Chair, this is Vice Chair. Oh, I have not, just because I'm trying to track. Yesterday, I picked up my laptop, and so I'm trying to figure out how much email was sent to my new email address versus my old. So I do see that 10 applicants were added, but I don't see the final list, and so I'm looking for it right now. And I haven't logged into my new email address for the state, so I'm behind on that.
Commissioner Newberg, also, I have one person that seems to be missing or was withdrawn. I had somebody that I had reviewed. Is that person been withdrawn?
You know what? Yasmin is looking into that. There is one name that initially submitted an application that was not included on the last list. And we are out of, again, an abundance of caution ensuring that this applicant withdrew. But we are looking into that.
And the reason I ask that question is because it changes the numbering as part of that, so that when you look at the numbers at a certain point, that shifts towards the last third, because if that person is not part of it, then the numbers of the last third are different than what is
correct. But for the sake of conversation today, but we may not have it depending on where this goes, we have a list that is clearly identifiable for today's conversation. We have a list of 42 names that are assigned a number, but there's a deeper question here, and that is that, you know, do you want to even begin discussing candidates if you haven't yet gone through the entire list? How many of the commissioners have gone through the list? Well, but you, Commissioner
Everything
Lerner,
but the
not the
last
last
10.
10.
Not the last 10, but I had reviewed carefully all the others but the last 10.
Okay.
So that would not be too hard for me to just look at the last 10 as we're speaking, if we were to go ahead.
Madam Chair, I saw the prior list. I have not seen the last 10, and so, and I am not hooked up to the new email address, and so I haven't seen the final 42 applicant list. So
Okay.
I don't have that in front of me.
So look,
this is Commissioner York. Commissioner Newberg, I'm not really comfortable. I've gone through the list. I've looked at the applicants. I've read the resumes, but I haven't really, in my head, I wasn't ready to make some recommendations of what, say, my top 10 or whatever it is.
Okay. So let's try to get on the same page then for thinking about this for next week. We had gone into the meeting with the hope of being able to discuss the candidates and narrowing the list down to begin the interview process. If we're not able to do that, obviously we're not going to be able to start the interview process next week. If it sounds like we're likely going to need to push things back so that next week we can narrow the list down to our top selections to interview. Does that sound comfortable for everybody?
This is Commissioner Meal. What do you think about how many people we should actually interview? What are we trying to cut down to? Are we trying to get down to 5 or 6 or 10? What's everyone's thought?
We had talked, Commissioner Meal, we spoke a couple of weeks ago about, roughly 5. We didn't want to lock ourselves into a specific number that if there are, up to 7 or, I think we want to interview all, viable candidates that we feel, are ready to step into the job. This is a unique position that, there's not a significant amount of training for. It only happens once every 10 years. There's no playbook. And so, there's amazing candidates, but when you think about people that have that unique skill set, I could let you know personally, I was able to review the 42 and I identified 5 that I would like to bring back personally. That list may expand based on the feedback and the desires of my fellow commissioners. But this is such an important hire that we can't, it takes time to look through these resumes and, do due diligence on all fronts. So I think, unfortunately, as much as I think we would all love to move forward and begin the application process, I'm afraid that we're going to need to delay this a week and determine the candidates that we'll interview at next week's meeting.
I agree with you, Commissioner Newberg.
Okay.
Commissioner York.
I concur as well.
Okay. There's one final kind of process question that we'll, again, need to revisit next week unless people want to make a decision right now. the last aspect of this is in prior meetings, we talked about our intention of interviewing the executive director in public. In terms of ground rules for going into executive session, we are authorized, and I would say it's probably more typical of commissions that they interview in executive session. We had made the initial decision, or at least maybe I'd say an inclination to interview in public. The reasons we felt that made sense is, number one, we felt like it was a live kind of real life situation and would give us a sense of how executive directors perform. We all collectively interviewed in public. The public is asking for as much transparency, accessibility, transparency as possible. I'd say maybe one or two downsides, in terms of disability, when people need accommodations, to have to maybe bring that up in a public setting can maybe feel a little more pressure, although there'll likely be subsequent interviews, I imagine. And then just confidentiality, if there are kind of tough questions that need to be discussed. So I don't know if anybody's opinions have changed. I don't know if anybody wants to chime in on what our initial inclination is, and to foreshadow for a decision we're going to need to make next week.
Well, Madam Chair, this is Vice Chair Watchman. You mentioned in good points that the whole process has been, for the most part, transparent. We're all publicly interviewed, and the different parties did decide on this. I actually am in favor of, full disclosure and a public interview process. I think that's, in terms of transparency, that's the best way to go. And then for my part, I think I haven't had time, and my apologies for not being able to get hooked up to the email. But once I get the final list, I'd like to submit, my top 5, that we all can consider. And between all of us, I'm sure we'll come close and round out to 5, or the top 5. I think would be the best approach. But for an actual interview, I see no reason why we can't have that publicly communicated. I think that's the best course of action for this commission. So those are my thoughts, Madam Chair.
Any other comments or feedback on that?
I'll just concur that I think keeping it open,
Okay.
as you've discussed.
John, our expert attorney here on employment law, as we're thinking this through, again, anything you want to add that we ought to be thinking about with this decision?
Chairwoman Newberg, I would just add, I believe you're correct, and Pam, please correct me if you have a different view, but I believe you're correct that it's within the commission's discretion as to whether or not you want to conduct these initial interviews in executive session versus open session. One possible solution to an issue that Chairwoman Newberg identified with respect to, if a disability question is raised, or an applicant indicates they have a need for a reasonable accommodation under the Americans with Disabilities Act, a solution there, if you decide to do it in open session, might be this, and that is, under the ADA, at this stage of the interviewing process, you as interviewers should not be asking those questions. Anything that would elicit information about a disability or a need for an accommodation. There's an opportunity for that later in the interview process under the ADA. That said, obviously, you have control over the questions you ask. You don't necessarily have control over the information that an applicant may volunteer about a health condition, a disability, a need for accommodation. But what you can do there, if an applicant volunteers that information, is just sort of diplomatically and politely redirect that conversation by indicating to the applicant, at this stage, there will be opportunity for discussion of specific potential accommodations later. So we don't need to get into that now. and maybe just end that line of inquiry by saying, you know, you've had an opportunity to review the job description, the job posting. In your view, do you believe you can perform these functions, you know, either with or without an accommodation? And if they say yes, great, we move on. And I suspect they will say yes.
Okay.
Even if they say no, it's probably best to leave it at that and take that up at a later time. But evaluate the candidates on their, you know, knowledge, skills, and abilities, and just redirect any volunteering of information at this initial stage of a discussion of a need for accommodation.
This is Commissioner Meal with a question for John. John, it was said that most commissions like ours do interview in executive session. Could you just give us a little background on that?
Sure. That's my understanding, that is probably the more prevalent process among commissioners when they're hiring for an executive director position. The primary reason being to not give, you know, interviewee 2, 3, 4, and 5 advance notice of the standard questions that are going to be asked of all applicants that interviewee 1, you know, didn't have that kind of advance notice of. So that's kind of the thinking and conventional wisdom as to the benefit of going into executive session, at least for an initial round of interviews.
And Commissioner Milligan.
You know, I hate to fall back on the legal framework. It's really not my place to make a recommendation. Like I said, the open meeting law statute gives the commission the discretion. It says may go into executive session for that purpose. So you're not required to. I think Chairwoman Newberg has done a good job of sort of outlining the pros and cons of the approaches. So that's a decision for the commission to make.
We can, you know, if you recall, when we all interviewed, the request made of us was that we please, based on honor code, not watch the prior interviews. And you know, I mean, I honored that. I think most people honor it. And at the end of the day, we have to think, is that a big deal to us? I actually think most applicants are going to anticipate our questions. The questions line up with the job description. The questions line up with what would be logical, you know, to be thinking about with what we want. So personally, I'm not as concerned, you know, with people knowing the questions in advance. We'll have follow-up questions that will put them on the spot, but you know, I'm open-minded. I mean, you know, and again, it doesn't have to be all or nothing. If we interview in public the first round, you know, it's possible we may choose to invite maybe the top 2 candidates back if we want another round. And if there are more sensitive questions at that point, when we're, you know, really in the nitty-gritty, maybe at that point we want executive session, or vice versa. It's I'm really open.
This is Commissioner York. John, I appreciate your feedback regarding the commissions. I guess my feeling is we've been in the process of having interviews in public so far, and I think we should stick to that process.
This is Commissioner Lerner. I concur. I think we can do that with the fact that we all did that as well. We know it can work. But I appreciate the feedback.
Commissioner Meal, I am fine with that.
Same here.
And you know what? And I agree. I mean, you know, this is a very healthy conversation to, you know, we've had time to marinate and, you know, really think about it. And I think it's a testament in part also to the public comments we're receiving, that the public wants as much transparency, and whatever executive director we ultimately hire, they are going to be in the public entirely. They're going to receive so much scrutiny. that, if they receive the scrutiny from, a little bit earlier in the process, maybe that's revealing.
Madam Chair, I have a couple of thoughts in terms of, as we look for the questions, what's going to be the reasonable term for the director? I didn't have a chance to look at how long the last directors were employed. Is it a year, 2 years? And that'll help a lot in my decision making. I don't have a clue as to the potential term for our director. I don't know if someone has some information about that. Thank you,
Yasmin, if you can clarify what was explicitly written in the job description. My understanding is that it's not a determined amount of time. I mean, I think a lot depends on litigation, how things play out in the next year. But if there's somebody on the call who can address what we put in the job description, and if there's anybody that knows how many years our previous executive director was technically employed.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe it said up to 1 or 2 years, but I'm pulling that up right now.
Okay.
That is what it says. It says this position is an at-will position and will serve for 1 to 2 years.
I think the bulk of the work should be viewed in a year or two, and what is after that, I think remains to be seen.
That helps. Thank you for the answers.
This is Pamela Pizer. Did you want some information I just pulled from the Constitution that provides kind of an outline of what you guys are supposed to do?
Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry, I just had it and then I lost here we go. Under provision 23, each commissioner's duties established by the section expire upon the appointment of the first member of the next redistricting commission. The commission shall not meet or incur expenses, which I would read to include staff, after the redistricting plan is completed, except if litigation or any government approval of the plan is pending, or to revise districts if required for decisions, or if the number of congressional or legislative districts is changed. So there may be some room based upon that to have an executive director for longer than the 1 or 2 years we've been discussing.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other discussion on the executive director position? I'd like to
Commissioner
go ahead.
I just want to clarify for next time so that all on the same page, and especially for me. Are we supposed to submit somewhere our top 5 or just bring them with us as ready for discussion?
So here's one way for that I'm going to throw out as an idea, and we can discuss. What I propose is that everybody comes to the next meeting with the list of applicants that you personally would like to see interviewed. We throw all the names into a big pot, and then based on numbers, not names, we discuss the strengths and weaknesses in public of the candidates. And then we, based on debate, finalize a list, and we don't have to have a predetermined number, but it sounds like roughly 5 seems to be the sweet spot, but we can see, and based on debate, try to narrow that list and come to a decision about, the top candidates that we would interview. And then that would then be on the 16th. So next week would be the 9th. We'll, narrow the list down with the intention, hopefully, of inviting the candidates. In the process, once we vote to invite somebody to interview, that candidate is then asked if they'd like to interview. If they accept the interview, then it will become public. Their name will then officially be added to the agenda in an official interview that hopefully we could try to do on the 16th.
If I could just provide an additional thought, this is Pamela Kaiser. If the lists were sent in advance to Yasmin, and if she was to see that across the 5 lists, you guys all have listed the same 1 or 2 people, perhaps, that might be a way to speed things up for the next meeting. If everybody's in agreement, you may not have a need to discuss a particular applicant in greater detail.
Well, whether we give the list to Yasmin in advance or we create the list together, it's still going to be the same list, because my suggestion is we debate everybody that we want. I mean, you know, we don't need to debate if somebody wasn't on anybody's list. But and if it's more efficient to give your list to Yasmin and she just compiles it in advance, we can then methodically go through that comprehensive list based on the numbers, the number of the person, and narrow it down from there.
This is Commissioner Lerner. I think just in thinking, if we don't need to do it that way, I'd like the maximum amount of time to be able to review. And I think we want to, otherwise we'd need to be giving Yasmin that list fairly quickly to give her time. So if we can just bring it, I think it can go pretty quickly when we say a number and nobody has said that person, we move on to the next person. At least my feeling is I think we'd be okay to work through it that way.
Any other thoughts? Okay, so let's plan on, you know, really scrutinizing the list this week, and we'll reconvene next week, the meeting to be confirmed later in the agenda, and we will all throw our applicants in the ring and begin to narrow the list down. It's exciting. Okay, a couple of just final items on this agenda number 6. It also talks about other administrative support positions. I just want to mention, I don't believe, Yasmin, that we have posted positions for the executive assistant position or the deputy executive director position or the public information officer. No, we did do executive assistant. I'm sorry.
That is correct. And that closes this Friday, the 5th.
That's right. That closes this Friday, the 5th. The other 2 positions, we had talked in the past about waiting until we were a little closer with an executive director in place so that he or she could be part of the process. With this kind of being delayed, I don't know if we want to move forward with at least advertising the position so that when the executive director's hired, there's a pool of applicants, or if we want to wait to have that executive director be part of the process. But it's something we should be cognizant of.
This is Commissioner Lerner. What I'm wondering is whether, since we're now delayed a little bit, do we want to extend the executive assistant position? I have no idea how many people we have who've applied, but we're not in any hurry right now because we have another couple of weeks before we even settle on a recommendation for the executive director. So do we want to extend that position another couple of weeks or week or 2 to keep it as open as possible since we're a little delayed?
I believe we've had at least 12 applicants. Yasmin, I don't know if there's been any other additional applicants.
Since February 23rd, I believe we had 13 applicants. I haven't received an update yet as to whether additional candidates have applied or not.
This is Commissioner York. My thoughts are, Commissioner Lerner, is that now that we kind of have a little better understanding of what the work we need to do as commissioners to get the applicants processed, I think the timeline will speed up. 1, and then 2, I think if I remember correctly, the executive director assistant position was posted at the same time as the executive director, so they've had adequate time to. So I don't know. I would tend to keep the current dates in place.
That's fine. I was suggesting that because we're going to have the executive director be actively engaged in hiring that position. And since we won't have that person for at least probably 3 weeks, that's the only reason I was considering that. But I understand. Sorry, Commissioner Lerner again. Sorry. One other concern is, I know just from years of hiring, is when you have something sit that's been out there, people often get other positions, and then that pool could shrink because while they're waiting, if this closes on the 5th and we don't consider a person for another 3 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks during that period of time, some of those candidates may have gotten other positions, and now our pool is narrowed. So that's another reason to just consider that. But whatever the commission decides is fine.
Yeah, Yasmin, what does it entail to just extend the the date?
Just for you guys to let me know and I can go ahead and extend it.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, in some ways, I'm not sure there's much of a downside. We don't want to extend it too far that becomes problematic. But if we hire our executive director, but 16th, extend it 2 weeks, I'm open. I mean, does anybody else have an opinion?
Isn't our legal proposal supposed to be in by the 12th?
That is correct.
So maybe we extend both by a week.
I like that idea.
And when is again, if we're thinking of, I don't know if we can do this all at one time. When is just checking, is the mapping is also out there? Because if we're going to extend, maybe we should consider all of these at some point, the extension.
You know what, I think this actually is uniform and makes sense, given that our timeline was delayed a week today. Maybe we just extend everything 1 week.
I would agree with that, Commissioner Ewert.
Okay, so given that we're in a specific item right now, focused on the executive assistant, I need a motion to extend the opening of the position for 1 week so that it would close on the 12th instead of the 5th.
Commissioner Lerner, I'll move. Yeah. Sorry, Commissioner Veal.
Do I have a second?
Vice Chair Watchman, seconds.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor, Commissioner Watchman?
Aye.
Meal?
Aye.
Lerner?
Aye.
York?
Aye.
Newberg is an aye. With that, the extension of the job posting will be to the 12th. Any other feedback on the Deputy Executive Director position and the Public Information Officer? Do we want to move towards posting those now? Do we want to wait a little bit?
This is Commissioner Lerner. I'm sorry.
I'm inclined to wait because I don't know if we do need a deputy right now. Obviously it depends on the capabilities of our soon-to-be named director, and then we can go from there. And I'm still not quite sure how much funding we have to work with. I'm still trying to ascertain, is it $500,000? And, in the budget cycle, I think it's coming to an end in June. And so, we need to work on that. So, but to answer the question, I think we have a little time, and I'm not sure, the work that's needed right now qualifies an additional staff person. So I've been inclined to wait. For both positions, the deputy and the public affairs person.
Does anybody have any disagreement with that? Okay, with that, we will move on to item 4, which we had deferred. Thank you very much, John. for joining us. You're invaluable. We appreciate you, and I'm guessing we're going to see you again.
My pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
All right, take care. So agenda item 4, which is discussion and possible action on data census delay and ways to mitigate its disruption. So just to let everybody know, I have done as much digging as I can to find out what data the state has. We have been told that even though the census data won't be released till the end of September, that states are provided some amount of census information, particularly through 2018. I do have a meeting tomorrow with Bo Dull, who is the state elections director from the Secretary of State's office. Look, I think at the end of the day, this is going to be an organic process where I suggest that we as a commission do everything in our power to try to provide maps for our candidates and our state as best as we can. I think that prior to the data coming in, we can do a listening and learning tour. There was a tremendous amount of travel that the maps, we may not have maps. We can learn quite a bit about where our population is. We can learn a lot about communities of interest. We can learn a lot about what hasn't worked for people so that when the data comes, we can hit the ground running. I don't think we can have any specific plans until we have our entire team hired, legal counsel, mapping consultants, who can help provide us the type of expertise with what work can be done in advance of the hard science. I'd also like to share that when I say it's an organic process, this is going to be an open conversation with our state. We have public comments. We've already received some public comments on this topic, people asking us to be cautious. We don't want to predetermine things. Psychologically, if you wedge yourself to what you think is going to be the data, and it ends up not being the right data, it can pose problems. So I'm optimistic. I think there's a silver lining in all of this. And that is that without the pressures of actually having the specific maps, the amount of learning and listening and the amount of collaborative work that we can collectively do, I'm excited by that. So, to be determined, we'll keep this as an agenda item and have updates as the weeks, progress. Just foreshadowing, it's possible we could do a little more work on the federal districts. There's a little more room. I mean, if there's slight changes with population centers, it would probably affect the state legislative map a little more than the federal map. But we're all going to learn together, and we're going to do everything in our power to get maps for our state. I am aware that the state Senate is entertaining a bill, and you know what? I didn't write down the name of the bill. If one of the attorneys on the call can maybe clarify, it's of interest to us but not relevant, and that is that the state legislature is beginning to look at what if we didn't have maps? Is it possible that future candidates could declare to run based on previous maps? All of that is something that we should note, but it doesn't interfere with our laser-focused mission to keep going, because I really want to get maps for our state. Any discussion?
I'm in the process, but this is Pamela Pizer. I'm in the process of trying to pull that bill number for you.
Okay. It's of interest for the public and the other commissioners just to be aware of what the state is, preparing for in case, there's further delays or a problem, but I'm optimistic.
This is Commissioner York. From what I understand, also to the public in Arizona, that the Census Bureau, the Federal Census Bureau, had a deadline of March of 2021 to get us data. You know, our primaries are in April, I believe, of 22. But there are some other states that are not, that are much sooner than ours. And so there are some lawsuits being filed by other states against the Federal Census Bureau to push this along, to maybe speed it up. So I'm not sure if the deadline that they have posted might not get accelerated. So, you know, just be aware of that.
Okay. Pam, you can chime in if you find the bill number, but unless there's any. Okay, go ahead.
I did get it, and I'd like to thank Kyle for assisting me with that. It's Senate Bill 1107.
Thank you. And again, it's not, it doesn't have a direct impact on our work. So full steam ahead. With that, we'll move on to item number 7, which is discussion and possible action on the budget. And again, you know, there is some question. There was actually a public comment question about this as well. I know Commissioner Watchman is keeping his eyes on this. We have been allocated $500,000 through the end of this fiscal year, which runs through June 30th. We've been allocated $3 million for the next fiscal year, from July 1 through the following 12 months. With that, we have to understand that we have been essentially selected to implement this mission, and it's our responsibility to do so. And if there's additional funds that are needed, we will need to make the case to the state legislature. So this is a guideline of what's already been appropriated, but it should in no way be the determining factor with how we see our work. I know, you know, we're embracing this with, I think, fiscal responsibility. You know, the location that we picked, the rent, and every decision we've made up to this point, I think has kept us in good standing with our budget. But we need to do what we need to do. And with the delay in time, once we hire the executive director, I don't think the budget's going to be a problem for us in the near future. But with that, I'll open it up for questions, understanding that our ability to truly flesh out a sophisticated budget that would meet the smell test for some of the business-minded folks around the table, I think we're going to need to wait until we have some staff on board. Questions, comments?
This is Commissioner York. I agree with Commissioner Newberg.
Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 8, discussion and possible action on bill paying of incurred expenses. Again, 2 aspects of our conversation here. One is we have explicit bills to pay that we will need to approve and have a process for paying them. But second to that, we also need to have a process conversation of how we want to handle these kinds of invoices in the future. And there may be 2 separate plans, one before an executive director and one after the executive director. So for now, I think what's most important is what kind of plan we want to have in place while we're lacking staff and working within the ADOA. Do we want, Yasmin, do you want to walk through, there are 3 specific invoices. One is from Fenimore, an attorney office. It was dated February 15th. That had to do with hiring counsel to process the, you know, whether the candidacy of one of the potential independent chairs had he or she been chosen. And then there are 2 transcription costs. I don't know if the commissioners have looked at the invoices, if they want to ask questions, or if Yasmin has any further detail on that.
This is Commissioner Meal. I make a motion that we approve payment of these 3 bills, and that further that we continue to just group bills like this for mass approval or at each meeting until we have an executive director and have them have responsibility towards that.
This is Commissioner Lerner. I'll second the motion of Commissioner.
Any further discussion? With that, we'll do a vote. Commissioner Watchman,
Aye.
Commissioner Meal,
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner,
Aye.
Commissioner York,
Aye.
Commissioner Newberg is an aye. And with that, Yasmin, you are authorized to pay those 3 invoices, and we will plan to collect these invoices as a group, and we will vote to approve them as each week moves forward. And I don't believe that we'll table, I think, the question with once we have an executive director in place for when that happens. With that, we'll move to agenda item number 9, discussion of public comments received prior to today's March 2nd, 2021 meeting. Any conversation about the public comments that we have received to date? I just want to thank again the public. We're reading them, we're incorporating the comments, we value them. They're important for us to understand what's right for the state. And we hear that, again, the overwhelming consensus is for transparency, accessibility, and to be careful with the data in advance of the census data. That's what we're hearing so far. With that, we'll move to item number 10, discussion and possible action on securing legal counsel and other consultative support. This is where we can discuss extending the deadline for RFPs for legal counsel. It was tentatively scheduled to close on March 12th. If we want to extend that, a motion to extend that to the 19th. I'd also, in addition to that, like to share that I do know that the staff, and I believe the AG's office, well, actually, I don't know if it's the AG's office or ADOA, would like to provide some training for us or some guidelines about how to be scoring the RFPs. We had initially thought that we would be doing that on March 16th, just understanding that a week delay, I'm guessing we probably won't get to that until maybe the 23rd, but we will bring in somebody to help teach us a little bit about how to interpret that information and score them. And the other thing that we're thinking about doing, and this has to do with kind of the learning and listening part with the census delay, in thinking about what kind of information we would need to really understand and have access to make our decisions. One possibility is to get some additional legal training. We're about to, hire some legal counsel. And I know in the past we've thought about it from, we need to make sure the Democrats are represented, the Republicans. The more I'm reading about previous cases that had to do with the redistricting commission and thinking about who we're hiring, I'm thinking about it through the lens of what function does the law firm serve? What are we hiring them for? And it seems to me that there's 2 main buckets. One bucket is saving ourselves from ourselves. And what I mean by that is all of the legal counsel about open meetings and public records and following the constitutional mandates as ethically and honestly as we possibly can. The second aspect of that has to do with Arizona's redistricting process, which has been litigated in the past that far transcend what the five of us have control over. Yet the legal counsel that we hire is responsible for all of that. And so I'd like us to really understand when we're hiring the legal counsel, what kind of cases have the counsel had to defend in the past? You know, what strengths did they need? And so when we go through the hiring process, we could think about it beyond just R's and D's, but rather the specific skill that we're hiring, and again, through the most efficient way. And the last thing that I want to do is, and again, it comes down to this RD. Let's not hire two firms that do the exact same thing that we're paying twice. You know, let's really think about hiring the right law firm or firms for different functions. So with that, given that we're delayed a week, what are your thoughts about asking a representative from the Attorney General's office to come in and do a presentation on what legal counsel have had to do in the past? What kind of cases have they defended, litigated, both as it relates to our behavior and the broader constitutionality of our system of redistricting?
Well, this is Commissioner Lerner. I'd be interested in hearing a presentation on that prior to us reviewing the law firms, just to get a better sense of the range and scope. I've read some things as well, you know, done some of the history, but it would be interesting to hear that from a legal perspective.
This is Commissioner Meal. The other thing that we would hope to get from legal counsel would pertain to the Voting Rights Act and anything else like that that impacts how we draw maps. So on the front end, before we mess up, making sure we're getting the proper advice.
This is Vice Chair Launchman. If you add to that list, I know that there's some challenges from some of the tribes in our state. And this is probably related to the Voting Rights Act. And so, you know, there's some nuances when it comes to the tribes. And, you know, for those who don't know, people like me, the Navajos and other tribes weren't able to vote in this state until 1942 or 1960. So, you know, way past the creation of the state. And so there's a lot of continued challenges relative to how tribes work and relative to the state. So I think some information on that. But getting back to your comment about what should, you know, the council be doing, I guess to me, it's to be determined, you know. And so you're right, in some cases, just from what I see in the past, we've had legal counsel, you know, to basically protect us from ourselves. And so, you know, as we start drawing those lines, you know, I don't know, you know, I'm envisioning, you know, some sensitivity, you know, just because, you know, of the voting patterns and how, you know, our state is made up. And so I think, you know, looking at the scope of work probably will be determined as we get down to some of the sensitive issues. And so if you look at the actions of the last two commissions, you know, trying to divide those lines and create those lines when you're, you know, trying to keep in mind community of interest and, you know, the parties that people associate themselves with, we have to, you know, keep that in mind. And so, I think in terms of the scope of work, I'd like to keep it open, at least for now, until we better understand, you know, how the data comes and what the public is saying, you know, and maybe what the lawyers are potentially going to advise, you know, looking at what happened in the last two go-rounds. So, you know, those are some of my thoughts at this point. So thank you, Madam Chair.
If I could provide a point of clarification, this is Pamela Kaiser. I did have a conversation with an individual, the State Procurement Office, who is working on the Council RFP. What was relayed to me is that she would like to come to the commission and provide them not just with training on the how the RFPs go, but also to have the commission be part of the actual evaluation process, because the commission's the one who will be utilizing the lawyers. And so based on the conversation you've just had about wanting additional information on past litigation, I think that that information would probably be most helpful to the commission if they got it prior to the SPO personnel coming in to provide training and direction and the actual evaluation process on the RFP that's out there for legal counsel. It's my understanding from speaking with this SPO individual that she imagined coming in and starting the process off because of the requirements of the procurement code. The vast majority of that will have to take place in executive session. But you would, assuming that I'm fully understanding what you guys are hoping to get from your presentation on past litigation, you would certainly want that to occur before the SPO presentation or meeting within the meeting.
And I think that the practical implication of that is we all need to set aside the time for this. If we don't want to delay the movement of all of this and we'd like the legal training, you know, are we all willing to add on, you know, a chunk of time, whether it's an hour or two, to a meeting in advance? Because remember, it's going to get busy. We have our interviews, you know, coming up. So, I mean, for me, I personally feel that it's a priority. I feel it's important and I would like it. But I'm open to, you know, I don't want to spend other people's time.
Commissioner Newberg, this is Commissioner York. I carry with your points you made earlier. I think also the education for the commission on RFP process would be valuable. So I would like to see us have the flexibility to have the time. I would guess we would do that on the 16th. Is that right? Or no, we were going to extend them a week. So probably the 23rd, I guess. Right?
I don't.
And I concur. I was just wondering if we don't necessarily need to wait to get the education piece, right? We can move forward with that whenever, but I do concur with wanting the information.
It's actually possible. So I did speak with one of the experts in the AG's office who has been highly involved in already kind of compiling summaries. And she is thinking about potentially being ready to present as early as next week. So given that we're not going to be interviewing next week, but rather just culling the list, if it's possible to get this training in next week, that might be an efficient use of time. But we can look into that. I mean, you know, we'll see what we can do with our staff.
Commissioner Reel, I agree with that because we don't want to do it the same week we're going to be doing the interviews. The interviews will be lengthy, so next week would be good.
Okay.
I concur.
If I could ask a question for clarification. If it's possible to bifurcate any of the procurement process, like perhaps training separate and apart from actually evaluating the RFP, would you like that to be something that's done to kind of spread out the time constraints, or is it you want one big meeting? Something to think about.
When would, Pam, when would somebody be ready to provide that training? What's the soonest they could provide that training?
I would defer to Yasmin on that. I believe I was told March 9th, but I don't I haven't had a subsequent follow-up conversation on it either. So I don't know if she reached out to Yasmin or not.
No, they did not. The last I'd heard it was that you were going to have a conversation with them, and then I never heard again from anyone.
I would imagine that we would have time. I mean, I think next week, if we focus on, I mean, we've done a lot of the preparing today. I think we would have time next week to do the legal training and the RFP training. We could aim for it if the experts are capable of putting their information together in time. Okay, well, we'll add this to the agenda items for item number 14. Anything else, Pam, you want to add on that?
No, I just wanted to make sure that I threw out, a consideration for you guys since time sometimes gets a little tight.
Yes. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 11, which is discussion and
Commissioner Newberg, I just have a quick question. I'm sorry. And
Sure.
Did we decide to keep the March 12th date for legal counsel, or we'll be thinking of extending that as part of this?
Yeah, thank you. We will need a motion if we want to extend the RFP. As we discussed, if we're extending everything a week.
This is Commissioner York. I motion that we extend the RFP for the legal counsel for the commission 1 week from March 12th to March 19th.
Do I have a second?
Vice Chair Watchman seconds.
Any further discussion? With that, we'll take a quick vote. Commissioner Watchman,
Aye.
Commissioner Meal,
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner,
Aye.
Commissioner York,
Aye.
Newberg is an aye, and with that, the motion passes. We will extend the deadline for RFPs for legal counsel a week to March 19th. With that, we'll move on to agenda item number 11, which is discussion and possible action on mapping consultant support. That initially was slated to close March 12th. I'm guessing that we may want to extend that a week as well. And I open it up for any other conversation that anybody might have on this topic.
This is Commissioner Lerner. I actually would like to suggest we extend that just a little bit longer to have the potential for the executive director maybe to participate in the process as well, since they would be working, that person would be working closely with the mapping consultant. So just as a thought, maybe to extend it till the end of the month, the 26th, and then it would close and the executive director potentially could be involved in looking at applications and all, and it would maximize our numbers. So 2 weeks instead of 1 week is all I'm suggesting.
I'm comfortable with this. I just want to say I only have one urgency with a mapping consultant, and that has to do with putting our entire team together and coming up with a strategy about what we can and can't do with preparing maps in advance. But I don't think, extending it 2 weeks is going to interfere with that goal at all. Is anybody opposed to extending it? Okay, does somebody want to make a motion?
Shereen, go ahead.
Okay, I'll move that we extend the mapping consultant's closing date till March 26th.
Do I have a second?
Commissioner York, second.
Any further discussion? Okay, a vote. Commissioner Watchman.
Aye.
Commissioner Meal.
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner.
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Aye.
Newberg is an aye, and with that, the motion passes. We will extend the mapping consulting support opening until March 26th. And with that, we'll move on to item number 12, which is a discussion on ADOA resources and updates. Thank you to Commissioners Watchman and Lerner for picking up your laptops. I think additionally, our website is up and running. It is bare bones. I want to just let the public know as well. We are going to wait till we have our executive director and our public information officer available for us to build out the website in a comprehensive, thoughtful way. But for now, I think it's a great resource, and so it's there for everybody's accessibility. Yasmin, I don't know if you have any other updates or if anybody has questions on these items.
No, I think we touched on human resources, which are the job postings that we have, procurement, the RFPs that are out, and the facilities. We're still waiting for the Auto Theft Authority to move out in order for us to be able to use that space.
Right.
This is Commissioner Lerner. Just for the, so the public has that address, could we just again announce, and so it'll be in public record, the address for the website, so everybody's familiar, just again.
The website, I believe, is irc.az.gov.
Thank you.
And the
Pretty good.
And the old link, the old IRC website, I believe on the top, it has a link to the new website as well. And vice versa.
Okay, thank you very much, Yasmin, and thank you again to ADOA for all of these amazing resources to just help position us for success. We're really, truly, deeply appreciative. We can't do this without you right now. So thank you. With that, we'll move to item number 13, which is an update on the status of the Howard Open Meeting Law complaint provided by our AGA legal counsel, AGO.
Thank you. Again, this is Pizer with the office. Did you want information to be done in executive session or in the open session?
Oh, the open session, and if there's something that we need to move into executive session, we can certainly evaluate that.
All right. So just as a point of clarification, the way this was agendized, it's only a discussion. I will wrap it up though with some considerations for you guys for a future meeting. The Howard complaint itself was sent from the AG's office to Maricopa County because the AG's office is at this point providing representation to the commission. So it wouldn't be appropriate for the AG or the AG's office to undertake an investigation when they're providing advice to you. Maricopa County's, I did make contact with them eventually. They felt that with their caseload, it would need to be sent elsewhere because it wasn't something they were going to be able to get to in the time frame I think that they prefer to work in. So it was sent to Pinal County. It's been assigned to a deputy county attorney there. I did make contact with her. For future consideration, at the next meeting, the commission's going to need to decide if they want the AG's office to continue with representation on this, or if they want to go with outside counsel or handle the complaint response on their own as a group. So that's something for you guys to consider, and then it can be discussed in greater detail or voted on at the next meeting.
Will somebody from the aid, or you or somebody else, be prepared to brief us in more depth on the decision-making process here?
Do you mean as to what each possibility entails?
Exactly. I mean, you know,
Yes.
and
I
should,
go ahead.
is that something that you want to do now or next week? And is this something that should be done in executive session?
Well, it is considered legal advice, so I can certainly, I'm prepared to do it now, although there's nothing in terms of legal action that can occur today based on the agenda. Because it's legal advice, it can be done in executive session, or it can be done in the open if you wish to waive that confidentiality. I can do it today, or I can do it on the next meeting, whatever the preference is.
Let me ask my the other commissioners. Well, two questions. One, there's two questions. Do we want to hear from Pam now on this? Number two, do we feel that we need to go into executive session and we don't have to decide, right? I mean, I imagine we can hear and then decide if we want to move in executive session. And then the other item is, we haven't taken a break yet. We're close to the end. Does anybody want a quick break, or do we want to just plow through? So those are the questions to think about.
I'm in favor of plowing through. I'm also, this is Commissioner York, in favor of going into executive session regarding this is our first legal challenge that we have ever dealt with as a commission, and maybe we need some ability to have that executive session, so that going future, we might not be able to make a decision whether or not to have it an open meeting or not. Those are my answers.
Any other discussion? I see Commissioner Lerner and Watchman nodding, so please speak for the transcription.
This is Vice Chair Watchman. I support Commissioner York's comments, going to executive session. That way we can hear more details. I think that's appropriate.
This is Commissioner Lerner. I concur. And also that we continue through. We have the time to have this discussion today.
Hey, commissioners, I apologize. As I'm looking at the agenda, it says update on status. The best practice would be to table this because it only says update. Although the general agenda notice does provide for the ability to go into executive session for all appropriate reasons. The line item on it just talks about an update. And just so you're aware, I didn't get this information until yesterday, so it would not have been timely for updating the agenda to make it in greater detail.
Okay, well, I did, to me then, out of an abundance of caution, I prefer to table it just because there's nothing urgent. And I'd rather, for the sake of just erring on the side of caution, you know, be responsible. Does anybody disagree with that?
No.
Okay, so Yasmin, let's add this to the agenda item for next week, and please note that we may go into executive session to discuss that.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else, Pam, on that item?
No. Oops. No.
Okay. With that, we'll move on to item number 14, which is discussion of future agenda item requests. We just had that last one, Yasmin. I know that items number from today's agenda 1 through 4, I would suggest we continue to keep in the agenda in case there are additional updates. We'll have our conversation about the executive director candidates. We may want to keep items on budget and bill paying just in case there are additional bills that, incur each week. And there's only one item that I don't see that's already been listed that we may want to talk about. So in the agenda, we have the next meeting date itemized, but we don't have a general schedule item. And I know that we talked briefly last week about some conflicts of schedules over the summer. Given that we don't have an agenda item today to discuss like ongoing scheduling, Pam, is that something we have to table till next week?
The conversation had occurred in the past. As I recall, you guys did discuss it. I don't recall if it went to an actual vote. The scheduling of meetings is typically done as an administrative matter. So it doesn't usually in commissions and boards get presented to the whole board for a vote. I think it's okay to have your announcement for the next date, but if there's going to be a big discussion on perhaps scheduling, certain types of meetings, that would need to be more specifically agendized.
Okay.
But the general meetings, I think you can go ahead and have it set.
Okay. So let's add, Yasmin, can I suggest that commissioners begin to think through their summer schedules, and if there are blocks of time that they would like to be able to take off over the summer, or times that they know in advance they have a conflict, to submit that to Yasmin so we can begin to compare schedules and work with each other to find common times to take off. And we can add that to the schedule, to the agenda item next week, but I'd like everybody to begin to really think through their summer schedules and be prepared to discuss them.
Commissioner Newberg, can I ask a question too, if regarding schedules and meetings? If we at some point move to live, and this may be not the appropriate time, I recognize that, I'm always saying that now. If we move to live meetings, which I know we would like to, if not available at that time to be live, they could still potentially call in and participate. So it may not be as difficult if we are able to, now that we have this technology all worked out, we may be able to have people who are not in town still participate even if we're live. Is that correct?
Yes, and in fact, we explicitly discussed this as a commission early on, where we, felt mutually comfortable with that arrangement.
This is Commissioner Meal. I don't know if we had talked about trying to do some meetings live, but right now, even for the interviews, I can see everybody better on Zoom than I can if we're in the same room all wearing masks. So I think until the mask requirements are down, I would prefer the virtual meetings. I'm not sure what anyone else feels about that.
This is Pamela Pizer. If I could just interject, the way it was left, at least as I recall, you guys had already discussed and voted to do virtual meetings for the time being. If there's going to be any extended conversation, it would be best to schedule this on the agenda so that you could have a candid conversation with notice to the public. That way it could go from there.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, for now, our interviews are scheduled to be done virtually. It's just, you know, an unfortunate reality of the COVID world. And I look forward to hopefully within a matter of weeks that we can put this on the agenda and talk about when we can resume in-person meetings and begin to travel. I don't think it's that far away, to be honest, where our staff is soon going to be, you know, hired and convened and, you know, not too far away. Any other agenda items to be added? And again, just as a matter of process, you have a couple of days. I know, you know, the weeks are short, and with the 48-hour notice to the public, where, you know, really need to get this done by Thursday morning. But if there are additional items that you think about in the next 48 hours, go to Yasmin. You know, you're welcome to add, you know, items to the agenda for our consideration.
Chairwoman, this is Yasmin. I have a quick question. Are we going to add legal training and RFP training to the next agenda, the next week's meeting?
Potentially, yes, if we can get the staff experts to present. Anything else on future agenda items?
As a point of reminder, you guys do have the ability to put things on the agenda, and then if for whatever reason it can't be done, like the person becomes unavailable or you don't have a quorum to hold the meeting, then you can always table something or the meeting as
Okay.
appropriate. But if it's not there, you most certainly can't move forward.
So yes, let's add it, Yasmin, please. Okay, with that, we'll move on to item number 15, which is announcements. We will meet. Let me ask, actually, we are tentatively scheduled to meet every Tuesday, 9 a.m. I was told there might be a conflict next week. Is everybody available?
I have a comment, Commissioner Maneuver, this Commissioner York. I have a conflict in the morning, so I would like to move our meeting time till 12 noon, if that's possible. On the
Okay.
On the 9th.
How does that look for everybody's schedule? And by everybody, I mean commissioners alike.
Commissioner Meal is okay with that.
Vice Chair Watchman's okay with it.
Commissioner
I'm
Lerner
sorry,
has
did we-
Or
Oh,
one, anything after 12 is good. So.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Commissioner
Sorry.
Lerner, I have a 3 p.m., but I will do what I can to change that, to push that back. And then I have something again at 4, hopefully by then, that I can't change. But I'll do my best to change that to change the 3 o'clock. So I should be able to do this.
I think with the 3-hour block, I think we could get the bulk of our work done. We are looking for additional training next week that extends it a little bit. I would like to request that we all collectively try to block the 9 o'clock, you know, on time on Tuesdays, only because it's not just us, it's also the public. It's you know, everybody's trying to put aside the time, but obviously, you know, life happens. So I'm comfortable with the noon to 3 or 4 o'clock time next week for our next meeting. We don't need a motion for that, Pam, do we?
No, not if
Okay.
it's said administratively.
Okay, so we will meet next week at noon on the 9th. With that, item number 16, closing of the public comments. Please note, members of the commission may not discuss items that are not specifically identified on the agenda. Therefore, pursuant to ARS 38-431, action taken as a result of public comment will be limited to directing staff to study the matter, responding to any criticism, or scheduling the matter for further consideration and decision at a later date. And with that, we come up to item number 17, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So move, Vice Chair Watchman, adjourn meeting.
Second.
Commissioner York, second.
Presuming no discussion, we'll take a quick vote. Commissioner Watchman,
Aye.
Commissioner Meal,
Aye.
Commissioner Lerner,
Aye.
Commissioner York.
Commissioner York would like to say aye, but thank you, Commissioner Newberg, for your job.
Thank you. And Commissioner Newberg's an aye. And with that, we adjourn, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week at noon.
Thank you.
Have a good week, everybody.